So many Americans are moving to Mexico City these days, you're just as likely to hear jazz on any given night. There's American barbecue here at Pinche Gringo. High-end shopping here rivaling Beverly Hills. And ridiculously cool condos for ridiculously low rents or price tags. That has led to an estimated 2 million Americans alone arriving in Mexico City in 2022. You could say to improve their vision. From this to this.
No tan bien, pero.
Just ask New York transplant Alexandra Demus, founder and CEO of one of the hippest, most popular relocation companies here in Mexico City called Welcome Home Mexico. That's helped move thousands of Americans here over the years, among them from Fortune 500 companies to staff workers with the U.S. government. And recently, more Americans than ever before, she says, are flooding into Mexico City.
It does feel like there's some kind of a wave that everybody's riding, and I do feel like they're flooding in. I mean, statistically, numbers are saying that hundreds of thousands of Americans are coming in on a monthly basis just to Mexico City.
Mexicans are said to have a mixed reaction to so many Americans moving here. On one hand, there are statues of Abraham Lincoln and Martin Luther King Jr. here honoring the U.S.-Mexico relationship. On the other hand, some Mexicans say it just seems that lately too many Americans are showing up here. Sort of like the many northern ducks flying south to Mexico City's parks each year, thinking they own the place, until they're reminded they don't. Mexicans say there definitely seems to be some growing pains going on, and curiosity why so many Americans are moving here. A lot of it, say Americans, starting during the COVID pandemic.
During the pandemic, I think a lot of younger Americans saw that they could work remotely, and that opened up a whole new world. So they started thinking, where can I go that's not too far from the States, where I'll have a better quality of life, where I can still get home quickly when I need to, even pop in for a meeting or whatever it might be. And of course, Mexico is the place to be at the moment.
Recent Mexico City arrival Ulysses Head-On, an immigration attorney from Miami, could not believe, he says, how cheap this luxury 2-bedroom, 2.5-bathroom condo was here in Mexico City's affluent Polanco neighborhood. In Miami, he says he'd pay $5,000 to $6,000 a month for a place like this. Here, he's only paying $1,600 a month.
I mean, I'm paying the equivalent of $1,600 here.
$1,600?
Yeah.
1,600.
Yes. Yes.
Amazing.
You know?
He says there's no question the rising cost of living in the U.S. and escaping the pandemic has led to Americans fleeing the U.S. to Mexico City in such big numbers.
Things like the pandemic that really, it was a total paradigm shift for everybody. And I think when people realize that I can earn the same and live wherever I want, you go to someplace else where obviously your expenses are far less than that they are in the States. And unfortunately, for a variety of reasons, the U.S. is becoming, or is already, utterly unaffordable.
Americans are also buying up properties here in Mexico City for a fraction of what they'd pay in expensive U.S. housing markets like New York or California.
Here in Mexico City, a lot of people are tending to go to the neighborhoods like Condesa, Roma, Cuauhtemoc, and the reason mainly is pricing. Housing is still extremely affordable in those areas. You can get a very decent apartment or a house from, let's say, $300,000 to $600,000 US dollars. Definitely would not be possible in a place like New York or California, or any big city in the United States where housing now is, starting at $1 million.
Meanwhile, the Mexican government says Americans in Mexico are greatly contributing to the economy here. For example, international tourism in 2022 earned Mexico nearly $30 billion. No small part of that, says the government here, from Americans spending money in Mexico City.
I think in general, the Mexicans are extremely happy that the Americans are here. I think, of course, there are some concerns. I think that there are, of course, people that come to Mexico that maybe don't speak Spanish, don't make such an effort to learn the language, don't make such an effort to understand the culture or the history of the country. So I think that can cause a little bit of conflict.
However, some Mexicans say the conflict is a little more than just a little bit and seems to be growing worse by the day. Says Mexican philosophy teacher and cultural critic Fernando Bustos Grope, who complains Americans are driving up the costs of rents and home sales here at a time when average Mexican families are struggling to find an affordable place to live and are now, in many cases, being displaced in their own city. All the Americans arriving here he refers to as a sort of contemporary colonialism.
Ya de alguna manera sí, porque justamente es como un color de piel hegemónica, nacionalidad hegemónica, y llegan a estos lugares a imponer lo suyo, ¿no? Y ahora lo que tenemos, por ejemplo, lugares o pueblos que están llenos de, pues, de gringos, ¿no? Porque son ellos los que llegan y fácilmente compran tierra y construyen. Así de pronto tenemos ya pueblos donde ya casi no hay, digamos, locales, ¿no? Porque fueron desplazados. Y eso de alguna manera es un colonialismo contemporáneo, ¿no? Es un colonialismo contemporáneo que se construye desde el color de piel, desde la nacionalidad y desde el dinero. Y hay un desplazamiento fuerte, ¿no? Pero también tenemos que ser conscientes de que este dinero, esta derrama económica, no es que suceda horizontalmente, no es que todos se beneficien de esta derrama económica.
What upsets him just as much, he says, is Americans who show up and expect Mexicans like him to speak English.
Americans, they speak only one language, no? It's English, no? In Mexico, we speak Spanish, and also we have like English lessons like in the school because we are like neighbors of US, but that doesn't imply that most of the Mexicans speak English. So if we Mexicans are like trying to learn more about other countries, other languages, why Americans aren't trying to learn another language, no? It's a little bit Spanish or any other language.
Uber driver Abel says business has benefited from so many Americans coming to Mexico City, but says he remembers one American customer calling him some vulgar names because he did not speak English.
Bueno, una sola ocasión sí me tocó a una señora que no la entendía, pero yo con el lenguaje universal, la mímica, ¿no? Le dije buenos días, le ayudo con sus cosas a subir a la cajuela y ella me hablaba en inglés y yo le dije no, yo no hablo inglés. Y sí se molestó y me empezó a decir en su idioma y yo sé, y sí escuché palabras antisonantes que eran groserías. Yo por respeto no le dije nada, pero sí ellos se molestan que uno no sepa el inglés, se molestan mucho.
It's not uncommon in some places for signs being posted telling Americans to go home, in not the most pleasant of terms. Fernando says it basically comes down to Americans and other foreigners being more aware and respectful of Mexicans.
Y creo que esta conciencia, o generar la conciencia, creo que tiene que ser sobre todo hacia los norteamericanos, hacia los extranjeros que vienen solamente como bajo esta idea de que es muy barato México, pero vienen, vamos por así decirlo, como sin ningún tipo de responsabilidad ética de por medio y al final pues vienen y se van, ¿no? Y entonces agarran como México como si fuera, o Ciudad de México, o México en general como si fuera como un patio de diversiones, como un lugar simplemente como para ir a divertirse, pero no tienen ningún tipo de compromiso ético, no lo asumen ni con relación a la gente del entorno, a la gente local, ni con relación a las tradiciones, ni con relación al idioma, ni a la cultura.
Though many new American arrivals like Ulysses say they are well aware of Mexican history and culture and how special a place Mexico is to live.
Mexico is a huge country, 31 states, 120 million people, 77 indigenous languages are spoken here. This is where the avocado came from, the cacao. There's even a chocolate museum here in Mexico City. It's a very rich country.
Viva México.
They are the most kind.
Amazingly nice. I think historically, some of the most polite. If you know anything about Spanish, if you don't speak Spanish and you're starting to learn, I think Spanish is one of the most respectful languages. You know, you never give someone an order. It's never like, give me that. It's always, would you mind, you know, could you please pass me that? So starting from their language, in history, culture, how important family is to them, their you know, sense of belonging, friends, all of that. It's, I think, one of the most respectful and friendly societies that I've known.
Alexandra says all of these reasons are why more Americans than ever are contacting relocation companies like hers. In terms of security here, Americans in Mexico City, she says, generally feel as safe or safer than in big cities in the United States.
I feel safer here than I do in New York. I don't know if I want to say I don't know if I want to say that, but I personally have a lot of clients that come to Mexico very fearful, worried about thinking that Mexico is unsafe. I have never had a problem. I have never felt unsafe, and I actually feel like every year it gets safer.
There are nearly 30 million people living in and around Mexico City, leaving most Mexicans to agree there is room for Americans too, as well as the benefits Americans bring to the economy here. Though other Mexicans are saying basta, enough already. However, they say if Americans keep coming, learning to speak Spanish and minding your manners does go a long way toward everyone getting along.